Hi, good evening everybody. Tonight's tutorial is doorstops and draft excluders. So they both work on a very similar principle, so the techniques are the same, and as always there is a couple of variations. Just before I've gone live tonight, I've seen that there's people have spammed our page with links to so-called watch this tutorial, which I know people have done before in the past, and it takes you to payment details. So please, I know the people who watch these videos know that there is absolutely no charge for them and no links to follow, but if you see any pop up, please can you either flag them up to Facebook or ban them, or please just do not follow them, because I'd hate for anybody to get scammed. So let's try and think about a different format or a way to avoid this. We had a few problems with this in the summer and they have been at bay since then, but I've just seen them pop up. Luckily, just before we came live, I noticed them, and hopefully they have all been banned, but there was lots of people trying to hack, so just be vigilant. That was obviously never ever a charge for these videos. So this is the kind of bare bones of it. This is the basis. So basically the idea for this is obviously creating something that is super practical, and depending on the fabric that you go for, obviously decorative as well, but how to attach a circular base. Mine doesn't look very circular because it's got a big bag of rice in there, so I've got a kilogram bag of rice in mine, and I will put some more stuff in. Got a little lump here just to give it a perfect shape. You can see it does look a bit like Quasimodo at the moment. So if you fancy the draft excluder version, obviously like a big long tube, it will follow the same basic principles, but I'm also going to give you an option to do a super simple draft excluder. So I'm going to make my doorstop out of this, just 100% cotton, just a lightweight poplin. This is going to be for Daisy's bedroom, and it has a little bit of a fairy theme, so we can keep her door up and keep our eyes on her when she's in there. And then I'm going to make my draft excluder out of this sewing linen, so a little bit of a heavier weight fabric just because it's going to be dragged all over the floor, but of course it would be absolutely fine in cotton again. So they're my fabric choices. I'm going to start with the with the doorstop, and then you'll probably see, but I will explain how you translate that into the draft excluder, and then I make a simple draft excluder. So I've just popped on earlier tonight on the resource folder on Facebook a template that looks a little bit something like that. And this is just a bit of a guide to making your pattern. Of course, you obviously don't need to stick to these sizes, but I think they're quite an ideal size for your draft excluder and for your doorstop. So this, obviously, I've printed out is to scale, but I've popped the measurements on, which is 13.5 centimetres, and this isn't to scale. It's just like a little guide. You might just want to screenshot it or download it, just to give you a bit of a reminder when you're doing them. You might decide you want to make them shorter or wider or whatever. But basic pie, mathematics, not steak pie or plum pie, will give you your diameter if you decide to change the proportions of your fabric. So I just went on an online calculator and gave the circumference of my draft excluder to get the diameter of my circle. So if this isn't printing out to scale, you can either draw it with a compass or obviously just recalculate your own if you do like a little bit of maths. So I've got a slightly different tripod. I'm hoping that it will give me better camera angles. So I feel like I've got this area covered and I've got the machine covered. Anything in between might be a bit hit and miss, so I do apologise if it's not ideal tonight. So we'll get there. We'll get there sometime, won't we? Bit of professionalism. So my rectangle is 30 centimetres high and 45 centimetres long. Obviously my fabric is dictating that I didn't want to have sideways fairies. And I'm going to use my little template to cut the base of my doorstop. Right, let's move back. Sorry if there's lots of squeaking. So I've got a little mini cutting mat, and I've got a little bit of a scrap. So I just used a fat quarter for my doorstop, which was absolutely plenty of fabric. There's all sorts left over. I think I'm going to have to do a tooth fairy pillow out of this. So I was quite happy that there was some left over. Maybe even a little bit of matching bunting or something like that, a couple of flags. So I'm just going to cut around my circle, which will be the base of my doorstop. Oh, there we go. It's not too bad, is it? Ironing board's probably not an ideal surface. It's not really ideal to be sitting down while using a rotary cutter, but it's only thin cotton, so hopefully it should be fine. So normally I do like to be stood up while I'm rotary cutting, so I'm properly putting my back into it, but hopefully this should just do for this little circle. Probably should have just used scissors after all that, shouldn't I? Just excited to have a little cutting mat back in the studio. I'm going to give up with those last little bits. I don't think I've quite put enough pressure on my ironing board. So I've got my little base, I've got my rectangle, and that's all the fabric you need. If you want to put a design on or a little pocket or something like that, then it's ideal to do it before you actually sew the bottom to the main bag. So move this out of the way, and it's the rectangle I'm going to be using first. I'm going to be using 1 centimetre seam allowance throughout this tutorial, and the first thing I'm going to do is create a side seam. So I'm going to zip a few pins in there just to keep it all together. So I will, as always, try and keep my eyes on questions. I'm hoping that everyone's got a nice clear picture today. I've got not any interference and no naughty people trying to bug us. So side seam, I'm going to do 1 centimetre seam allowance. So this is where there might be a bit of... So hopefully you'll find this easier. It's harder for me because I've got a big phone in my face, but hopefully it'll be easier for you guys to see. So I'm going to use a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and I'm just using a regular sized straight stitch. So on my machine, you can see there's a kind of stitch width and a stitch length, and it automatically turns on at 2.5 millimetres, which is ideal. So I'm going to do 3 stitches forwards and then 3 stitches back. And just zip all the way along that seam. And then of course at the end I'm going to do 3 stitches in reverse and 3 stitches forwards, and just cut any excess threads off. Right, so it's going to be this transition phase where you just literally can just see my face. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to want to match up my base of my drawstring. What, I'm just talking absolute rubbish here, aren't I? Of my doorstop with my main tube. So I'm going to use my iron. I'm going to use my pen and some pins, a few different methods, just to give you a few different choices. But basically, I'm going to fit this circle to the bottom of here. So if you've ever made a memory bear or some sort of creature, you might have done that with the paws. It seems really daunting because you think, how on earth is that going to fit on there? So just to make it that little bit easy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to iron a crease opposite my seam that I've just sewn. So basically I've sort of divided my tube in half, and then I'm going to just put a little mark with my aerial pen. So you could use pins, and I will be using some pins at some time. So I've got a crease there, and I'm obviously making sure I've got the bottom of the fabric. If you've got a plain or a polka dot, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to just line up my seam and that little marker I've just made, and I'm going to press this seam open. So that crease and my seam should be laid sort of on top of each other now, like that. And I'm also going to smooth out the sides. So, and then I'm going to put some pen on here. So I've got 3 creases and a seam. So in effect, I've just quartered my fabric. So obviously if you've got a heat erase pen, it's not ideal. If you've got an air erase pen, it's brilliant because putting the heat on will actually strengthen your mark. So that's my little tube, and you can see I've got the creases in there. and I've also got the seam. So to match that up, I'm going to fold my circle in half and give it an iron. And then fold it in half into almost like a quarter of a circle. Well, just like a quarter of a circle. And then iron it again. And I've got that in quarters. So again, I'm going to put some markers at each one of those points, just in case my creases start to fall out as I'm handling it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to match up each of the quarter points from here and here together. I'm going to marry those up. So I'm putting the right side of my fabrics together. And this way, I think, makes it feel a little bit less daunting. So you don't feel like you've got this kind of big loop of fabric and this little circle and you're trying to kind of get it all together and you get to the end and you've got a big gap. You've just got little quarters to do. When I do necklines on jumpers or hoodies or t-shirts, that kind of thing, or elastic on things, I tend to do this, and then you're breaking down what you've got to deal with so it doesn't feel so over-facing. So you could, at this point, I've now got 4 pins in the bottom. You could, if you wanted, just stretch each quarter out and put a little pin in the middle. So you've got even less distance to travel. You've got that bit of a safety of having a pin. I wish people could shout when they got a question. All I can see is can see bits of text. Oh no, hope there isn't any more sort of spam and awful links. I know bless her, Katie's got her eyes open to try and delete things as they come up, but some not nice people in the world, is there? So we've got something that looks a little bit like that. Now when I sew it, I'm going to put this circle onto the base of the sewing machine, and that is because there's obviously less fabric there, less things go around. If I had all this fabric down, I can't really see what's going on, and there is obvious kind of a real risk of just sewing loads of gathers and tucks and pleats in when you really don't want them. So I'm going to be sewing it, so I'm looking at the main shaft of it, and it's just the base that's going to go based down onto the sewing machine. So doesn't matter where you start, because of course you're going to come all the way back round in a round, and it's the same 1 centimetre seam allowance. So if you have the option on your sewing machine to drop the needle, it's brilliant. It's really good if you're sewing anything with curves and corners, because it just means you can give yourself a breather and just stop, and you're not going to leave your place. So this machine is very good, and it normally automatically does it, but not all machines will do that. If it doesn't, you can just turn your hand wheel aside, but it is a lovely little feature. And just take it nice and slowly. So I'm just moving it around, and then what I'm going to do is, when I feel like I've got all this fabric in my ways, I'm just going to kind of just readjust it, and that's why it's good to just stop. And obviously you don't want to be doing that while your fingers are near the needle. It's not what anyone needs for the new year. Trip to A&E. And just, getting stuck on my pin there. Just getting that fabric out of my way. So I'm still trying to keep my my seam allowances, my edges lined up together. And all the way around, and every time you feel like it might look it's going to crease, just give it a bit of a smooth over, get it out of your way. And then when you get back over your original stitch, I'm just going to do a few stitches over, and then 3 reverse and 3 backwards. It's all sealed together. I'm going to zip those pins out. So, oh God, it's not a good time of year for chin angles, is it? After Christmas. So, got something that looks like that, and then when you turn it inside out, so So you've got your circular base there, and I don't think you might, I've got to think about a tiny little pucker there, but not too bad. Apart from that, I'm pretty happy with it. To be honest, I think that's something that probably might press out. So the last thing to do is to do a hem on the top edge. Now, if you wanted to, on your fabric, if you had something like the linen or canvas that did fray quite profusely, you could do some overcast stitching on your seams, especially on the top of the side seam where it might just peep out. So maybe just on that little area there. But of course, for the most part of it, it's going to be internal, so it won't be too obvious. So I'm going to do a double turn hem. Please let me know whether you feel like this format is, apart from the crazy chin angles, is a little bit better. So I'm just going to turn over the top edge of my bag. I'm going to turn it over by about 1.5 centimetres. It doesn't matter if you're not mega accurate. There's plenty of fabric within that 30 centimetres to give you a tall enough doorstop. So if you're going to do a draft excluder like this, of course your tube would be longer and you would have one to put on each end. So I will do in a minute the simple draft excluder and about where to leave your gap and that kind of thing, but you would follow the exact same principles that we've done here and just repeat it twice. So hopefully you will feel like adding a circular piece of fabric to a straight piece of fabric actually isn't so scary. I think this would upscale a little bit. It would make a really cute summer bag. So that may well be a little summer project or spring project for us all. I think Daisy would love that little crossbody bag, little drawstring maybe, little pocket. We can start building up all our skills together and mashing them together, I think. So I'm just tucking that fabric in. So I've turned it over once, and now what I'm going to do is just tuck that raw edge in. If you can quite see from there. Oh, I'm just making it wobbly, aren't I? I'm just tucking that raw edge in and tucking it over again. So I'm in effect doubling my fabric and reducing that hem allowance by half. And again, you don't have to do doubles hem. You might just want to do a quick, easy, simple single hem or overlock or overcast the edge. But I do like a nice, neat double hem. It's a nice one if you've done skirts or shorts or pyjamas or quite a lot of things with me, then whoop, you will know I'm a fan of these. And I do them quite often. So back to the machine. Oh God, I'm gonna have to get a nice frame to cover those up on a nice bunny picture or something. So I've just taken this box off my sewing machine. Quite often it's something I'll do if I'm sewing a sleeve or something like that. So just so that I can slot this on and just again sew all the way around and around. So just reducing the chances of sewing the doorstop shut, because we don't want that. We won't be able to fit our bag of rice in. And I'm going to do a stitch that's nice and close to the top edge, to the bottom, the lower edge of my my hem. So again, because I'm sewing all the way around, 91, I don't know what I've done there, right? I'm sewing on zigzags there. Obviously pressed the wrong button. Oh, no, right, there we go. There we go. So by sewing along this bottom edge as closely as you can, you're going to stop that fabric that you just really lovely pressed over twice from lifting back up and obviously then revealing your raw edges, so they'll stay nice and tucked inside. And then finishing with my 3 stitches forward and then 3 stitches in reverse and then 3 stitches forwards again to give myself that really nice, neat finish. So God, I think I need a full makeover if we're going to be this close next time. Hopefully you've got blurry pictures at your end. So we've got the main bag of the draft excluder. I knew I'd get them mixed up all night. The doorstop, and now, like I said, all I've used is a bag of rice. I've got a 1 kilogram bag of rice, which is fairly weighty. Obviously, it depends on your door. If you need something heavier, if you've got any pebbles or things like that, big stones, they might also be good. So I'm just going to slide that inside the bag. There's still quite a little bit of room around the outside, so I'm going to use some stuffing just to give it a little bit of shape, so that it's not doesn't quite look as ugly. God, need to get all the logistics sorted, don't I? So it's a learning curve. Every day's a school day. Homeschool days now. So I'm just popping a little bit of stuffing just all the way around that bag of rice, just to make that shape a little bit more attractive. Just a bit like, well, stuffing is a bit like that. You can kind of just tweak it and play with it until you're happy with it. Still looks a bit lumpy and a bit like Quasimodo, but hey, I'm sure it will do the job. And all I've got is just a little piece of twine that I've tied around the top. Obviously you could use ribbon or pom-pom trim or rickrack, or make your own sort of little cord or whatever, but I'm just going to go for a little bit of twine, so it just finishes it all up, seals the top off, and then obviously it's ready for action. So that is the draft excluder. Nice circular bottom. I think you can see the shape a little bit more like that. And now I'm going to do my draft excluder. So they're both super simple, quick projects. So my draft excluder, I've measured my door, so it's entirely up to you how far you want to measure and whether your door is in a recess. My door is this door here. It's like the door to the Arctic. Outside's freezing, so I've given myself a couple of centimetres either side. So my door measured about 80 centimetres, and I've added a centimetre either side for seam allowance. So I've got a piece of fabric that is the same depth as the doorstop. It's 30 centimetres and it is 82 centimetres long. So all I'm going to do is basically make a flat rectangular tube. So obviously if you were going to do your lovely circles, you would need one at either end, and we're still going to be leaving a gap to stuff it either way, whether you do a simple flat one like this or one with circular ends. So I'm just going to do that now. I'm going to prep that. I'm going to put that roughly in the middle of my draft excluder. And the reason I'm doing this first is because I'm highly likely to forget that I need to leave a gap that needs stuffing, because I think my brain is that pickled at the moment. So just to find my centre point, I'm just folding my fabric in half, which is beige, and completely blending with my ironing board. It's a good job we're doing covers next week, because this one is absolutely gross. Pinched dams. So that's my halfway mark. And we're going to be putting loads of stuffing in, so it's a sort of a bit of a false economy, thinking, well, I don't really like hand stitching, so I'm going to leave a little gap so I don't have to do much hand stuffing. I would keep a nice generous hands width there, and I always tend to use my hand, because obviously that's what's going to be popping all the stuffing in, rather than measuring it out. So just slap your hand on there, and obviously everyone's hand is slightly different, so it's good to measure your own, because you're the one who's going to be stuffing it. And pop a pin in, and that will just remind me that I need to leave a gap there, I should hope. So on the sides, just to make it look a little bit more exciting, because like I said, it's going to be fairly boring, I'm going to put a little bit of pom-pom trim in. So I'm going to switch over to my zipper foot just to show you how that can make things a little bit easier. So I've pressed that rectangle, so I've got sort of a crease that's going to be a side seam, and then a crease, and then an actual side seam. So I'm going to measure my pom-pom trim. So this is great if you've made cushions or projects and you've got funny little bits left like this that wouldn't go around a cushion or wouldn't go around a lamp, but you don't really know what to do with. So I'm just going to cut my pom-pom trim, so it's the same length as my seam, and I'm going to tuck the pom-pom trim in. So I'm lining the pom-pom trim up with the edge of my fabric, like that. And I'm just going to put a few pins to keep that in place. So as we sew it, we won't be able to see the pom-poms. They will sit inside the tube, so that obviously when we turn it, theoretically, they will then be on the outside. So it's like a little sandwich. So your pom-poms are a bit like your filler. So zip feet obviously are great for zips, but they are also good for other things. So things like piping and pom-poms certainly make it a little bit less annoying. So there we go. I've got a little sandwich, and again I'm just going to press this other side so I get my nice side seam so I know where I'm putting my pom-poms to. And again, just measuring that little bit of trim. So if you've got a pom-pom like I have, I've got one pom-pom that's kind of going to sit right on my side seam. I'm just going to trim that extra pom-pom off. That could be a reindeer nose next year, something. Put it in your craft box. Don't want to be wasting anything. I'm just going to pop, again, some pins in at this side. So the stuffing that I'm going to use for this draft excluder is completely and utterly free. It is scrap fabrics. It's bits of scrap that are absolutely tiny and minute and literally could not make anything else, like teeny weeny bits. It's things like old pillowcases, the actual like outers from when I've used the stuffing for craft projects, once they've kind of lost that that real fluffiness on your bed. I always use it things like when I'm stuffing my pumpkins in the autumn and bits and bobs, bears and things like that. My pillow inners, clothes that have had the day basically, especially with the kids, and they've worn through the knees. So it's literally all scraps and rags. The thing with stuff like this, with the toy stuffing, is that it's not particularly dense. It is hollow fibre, so it's not particularly warm. It will stop an element of draft, but of course the actual rags will really bulk your draft excluder out. It'll be like a little dead weight. It'll be really heavy, but it will really stop those cold airs coming through. So I'm just going to flip it back to here, and I've got my zipper foot. So a zipper foot is the kind of thing you will get as standard with a machine generally. Where are we? Sometimes you might not, so it's something that you could buy. For most machines, you can get away with getting a universal zipper foot from eBay or Amazon or something like that. Some machine manufacturers are a little bit more expensive and you've got to buy their posh ones. But for Janome or a brother or Singer, I think, generally they're probably about £3, something like that. They really aren't bank breaking, but they're so handy. So on my machine, there's a little lever on the back, and as I squeeze that lever, sort of press it forwards, and everyone's will be a little bit different. Some will just snap on and they'll pull off, and this comes off, and then you'll notice on the zipper foot, you can either put it on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. You can't put it down the middle. So you want to work out which side you want to be sewing at. So I want to be sewing down the right-hand side of my pom-poms. So I'm going to put it on the left-hand side of my presser foot. So I'm just going to lower my presser foot down gently, and it should click into place. So the idea with this is that when you sew, you're going to catch your pom-pom trim and your fabric, but not have the bulk of the pom-poms underneath your presser foot. Whoop. So I've made sure I've got my securing stitches at the end, but I'm not too worried about the beginning because I know I'm going to be sewing that seam in a minute. So just to give you an idea, they sort of pop through like that, and it wasn't too problematic. So I'm going to flip that over and I'm going to do the same from the other end. So this time I'm starting at my folded end, so I need to make sure I've got my reverse stitches here. Oh, it's not wanting to. There we go. So I can see there already when I'm going to come and sew this side seam now, that pom-pom's going to be in my way. So that is going to have to go. It's going to have to bite the dust as well. So another reindeer nose for next year. So now I've done that, I'm quite happy with my pom-poms, how they're looking. I'm going to remove my zipper foot and put my standard foot back on, because the next thing I'm doing is just sewing a standard seam. So just make sure there's no pom-poms in my way. Move those out of the way. So I'm now just going to sew from the end we've just been sewing the pom-poms on to my gap in the middle, and I need to make sure I'm not going to forget. So I definitely want my 3 stitches backwards and then 3 stitches forwards. What I'd be tempted to do is just support that and just do it 3 backwards again, 3 forwards again. So you've almost got you have got 5 layers of stitching all together there, but it will just really reinforce those stitches for when you're really pushing that stuffing in. So 3 stitches forwards, 3 back, 3 forwards, 3 back. It kind of feels like this whole last 12 months, doesn't it? 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And then ending with those little reverse stitches. So I'm going to try and move back in readiness, because that is me done with the sewing machine for now. So I've just turned that off and it's just time to do some stuffing. So I won't do it all. Hazel, where's Ralph? Oh, Ralph just is really not bothered about sewing. He's not interested. His time clock is a bit like the kids, and it's bedtime. Oh, I say that, he's just scratched at the door. He's always heard my name. Ralph. Oh, Hazel. He was coming to see you. He's missing everybody already. Obviously his training's going better than we thought, and he's aware of his name. So I'm just turning this big tube inside out. And I'm just going to get my other end in. So it's not too fiddly. Normally this is the kind of thing I probably do my trusty knitting needle, because it's so big I can get my hand in. So I'll just gently pull those pom-poms out. Get some nice corners. So I've got my big rectangle now, and it is time to literally stuff. So like I said, I've got all sorts. So they are the tiniest, scrappiest, scraggliest little bits like that, and it's literally packing it to form a really